For those of you who don't know me, I use the F word. I'm sorry. If you can't handle that, there's the fucking door. All right, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this morning. I especially like to thank Dave Tate and everybody at EliteFTS who has always had such great faith in me to ask me to speak every year. I also like to thank some people who are in the audience today. There's some great speakers you have today, and I'm not including myself, believe me. I brought my notebook and pad. Last week I attended a dinner at James Fitzgerald's house with Dan Paff, Stuart McMillan, Derek Everly, Brett Contreras, myself, my assistant who's our Director of Sports Science, Anthony Paroli, and I'm probably forgetting Mark Verstegen. And I spent 3 hours in a notebook spending the entire time with Derek Everly, who's a track coach from British Columbia, Canada. If anybody knows anything about Derek, he's the guy who brought Dr. Bondarchuk to the United States. So I sat there in total amazement and awe of the things that I was learning because I thought I knew a lot. I'm like Farmers Insurance. I know a lot because I've seen a lot. That doesn't mean I'm any better than anybody in this room. We all share the same passion for learning. I try to spend 1 hour of every day of my life trying to read and learn to enhance the ability of my athletes. I've always said you limit your knowledge, you limit your abilities, you limit your abilities, you limit the development of your athletes. And what's your job? To develop your athletes. So do your job. Take your time and spend time reading. Ask people questions. Attend seminars. So there's some great people in the audience who I'd like to recognize who have enhanced my career and my knowledge, and guarantee when I'm done today, I'm gonna sit down with a guy in the back that looks like a fucking Muslim and have to be critiqued by him about you should have said this, you should have said that, you shouldn't have said that slide should have said this. So with any more further ado, Evan Marcus from the Cleveland Browns is here, Aaron Wellman of the New York Giants. Where's Aaron at? Aaron's here. Obviously there's other great speakers. Mike Gadango of freakstrength.com, who was an intern with me and still actually one of my go-to guys when I have questions is here. So where's Mike at? He's way in the back with the Cardinal hat, free gear. Where's my girl, Julia Ladusky? Has anybody ever been to Buffalo, New York? Anybody from Buffalo, New York? I feel bad for you. You have my sympathy. I fucking hate that place. 3 things I hate in life: arrogance, laziness, and delusion. That's everybody in Buffalo, particularly my wife's fucking family. If you've ever read the book, The Mob in Buffalo, I think half a chapter is devoted to her father, Freddie the Bookie Saya. So this is what I married into. My wife owns a house in Buffalo, paid off, scot-free. I refuse to go back. One of the people who kept me sane at the University of Buffalo, because they have no sense of urgency. They tell you this is the way we've always done it. Really? This is the way you've always done it? No wonder you people don't win around here. So Julia, I literally had a gun cocked and loaded to my head every day. Like this. Julia would have to come in and say, it's going to be okay. I'll take care of it. So Julia, I used to call her Mother Hen. One of the greatest compliments you can have is when one of your athletes still calls you. This is one of the best athletes I've ever coached in my entire life. Had a high motor. There is some good things that come out of Buffalo. Not many. There are some. One was my wife, and you see where I took her to Arizona. Trevor Scott, who played 8 years in the NFL, played for the Oakland Raiders, LA Raiders, and then went on with the New England Patriots. I've known Trevor forever. It's a tremendous pleasure training. Trevor is here. And obviously Nate Harvey, the University of Buffalo. I still feel bad for you, Nate. I was one of the people responsible for him getting hired there. Please forgive me. But Nate is here. So there are some great people in the audience. There's some great people in here with great knowledge who I will be asking questions to as we go on. Now to start, I'm going to create controversy and I'm going to rant. For those of you who don't know me, I use the F word. I'm sorry. If you can't handle that, there's the fucking door. All right, now see, this problem I have with technology, and I may start ranting already. There it is. Okay. I'm a firm believer in 2 factors that influence everything we do in life. One of those is genetics, Second is your environment. That's how you play the cards nature's dealt you. Nature doesn't deal all of us the same cards. Trust me, if it did, I'd look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I don't. This is a 10-pound, 6-ounce baby boy. I'd like to push this puppy out for 12 hours. Women, you have my ultimate respect. This is Elijah Penny, who is a free agent running back with us this year. He came out of Idaho State. Elijah's about 6'4", 250 pounds. He's one of those guys that just runs north-south, does not know anything about east-west. He's one of those guys, when you tackle, you just bounce off of him. Think genetics isn't important? This is his kid. Look at this. He has pecs, arms, abs, thighs, and a head the size of a fucking lampshade already. If you don't think genetics has something to do with everything we do, then you haven't read some of the stuff that Chris Corfus has written. Is Chris here this morning? There he is. And he talks about the ACTN3 gene that you need to possess for speed enhancement, although there are windows of opportunity that I will get into later. But this is what the role of genetics should play. I would love to train this kid in about 10 years. Elijah will never work again a day in his life. As long as he controls his environment and puts him in an environment to be successful, which nowadays is very hard. Remember when I'm 60 years old now, well, I'm going to be 60. This is my 38th year of doing this. And when I grew up, we played a game called musical chairs. Everybody know what musical chairs is? 30 kids, 29 chairs. When that music stopped, you fought like crazy for that last chair. Remember that? Nowadays, 30 kids, 30 chairs, and let's talk about your feelings when we're done. And if you don't like the fucking chair, we'll get you a new chair. That ain't reality, people. That's entitlement. It's the same thing where everybody gets a trophy. When I was growing up, you went to a church for baseball, and there were 2 sheets of paper. The people who got cut and the people who made it. If you got cut, you dealt with it. That's not society nowadays. Everything is given. Go ahead, be one of those parents that gives your kids everything. Then you'll develop what we call an unmotivated brain. How many people have read extensively on the brain and all the brain research? Pretty fascinating, isn't it? Your brain is your governor. Everything starts there. Whoever, whatever designed us, please forgive me, good Lord, knew what they were doing. Because the brain controls everything we do. And when you start to read, I encourage you, if you study every day, don't just study how to get people stronger. That's only one piece of the puzzle, especially for an athlete. Read outside about the systems in the body, which I'll get into in a minute, about the brain, about the neuroimmune system, about the endocrine system and the hormonal response. Start to understand training on a cellular level, not just the musculoskeletal level. Stop being meatheads. The old days of the knuckle-dragging meathead is over, especially with the introduction of biometrics or data. Don't get me wrong. We collect data, and biometrics being defined as monitoring the athlete's physiological response to training, because now we have numbers to look at. Now we have data to qualify, but data doesn't tell you everything. It doesn't really give you an indication of fatigue, and it really doesn't give you an indication of adaptation to load. What it just does is gives you numbers and allows you to make decisions based on those numbers. The problem is, if you're a data fanatic, then you can't see the forest through the trees. You're like that drunk that relies on a lamppost walking down the street from lamppost to lamppost. It is a tool. Like everything in your toolbox, it is a tool to be used. And it tells you great information, but you can't just rely on data. So this is my rant on genetics. Here's my second rant. Everybody know who this guy is? Albert Einstein. Greatest mind in the world. The guy that came up with doing the same thing day in and day out. The true definition of insanity is doing the same thing day in and day out and expecting different results. For all us people who are true meatheads in this business, you understand that what you got you to 300-pound bench ain't going to get you to 400. What got you to 400 ain't going to get you to 500. So you better come up with different ways to attain those goals. This is my desk. I get criticized all the time because my desk is a mess. Albert Einstein said it best. If a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, what then is an empty desk a sign of? I feel bad for you OCD fuckers out there. You know those guys, you walk in, everything is in its place. Either the desk is sporadically, it's just spotlessly clean. You can eat off it. I panic. I also panic when I see people pull out a foot ladder, which I'll get to in a minute. So this is my desk at work. I'm constantly reading, and if you ask me where things are, I actually know where they are. It's just under that pile. It's under that pile. Gadango's seen my desk. It's a mess. But it's a mess because every day I'm researching and reading. There we go. Before I get into some other things, I like to acknowledge all the people I've learned from. And look at this. This list grows every day. First thing I did when I found out that BA had asked me to come to Arizona was I got in touch with a guy by the name of Dan Path, whose name's up there. I went through a friend of mine, Frank Rizzo, who knew Dan very well, and I said, Frank, can you get me in to see Dan? One of those knowledgeable men I've ever been around. But understand this, Dan is knowledgeable in his sport. His sport is track and field. Some of your sports in here are powerlifting. Some are bodybuilding. Some are Olympic lifting. You can't do what you do with your athletes. Your athlete's sport comes first, and the technical and tactical demands of the sport, and understanding that you can't train everybody the same. How many people know who Jeff Foxworthy is? You know Jeff Foxworthy, Blue Collar Tour? You might be a redneck if you take a Piggly Wiggly bag full of clothes and get on a plane to go to Hawaii. I'm going to start doing something like this. If you still pull out a foot ladder and tell your athletes that they will develop great speed and acceleration, you might be a dumbass strength coach. If you're still running 300-yard shuttles and believe that anaerobic lactate is going to provide energy for the sport of football, you might be a dumbass strength coach. That's what I'm going to start doing. And trust me, don't get me wrong, I'm done some done-ass stuff. So I'm going to have to include my name on there too. But one of the best things I ever did was I reached out to Dan Path and just opened up a whole new world of understanding the human body from a cellular level, from an endocrine system, from a hormonal response to training, but also understanding that what Dan did, I can't do with my athletes. So I have to ask myself, how do I take what Dan has just given me and adapt it to my environment, my circumstances, my athletes? So when people usually ask me a question, I always begin with this: it depends. I don't know your environment. I don't know your situation. I don't know your athletes. I do know my athletes, which is, again, part of your job to know your athletes. Every year, Mark Uigama, who's going to speak this afternoon, who's a brilliant man, we get together every year, and we've been doing this since I was at the University of Pittsburgh, just to spend a couple days talking. One of the first things I did when I got to Arizona, when Uwe came out to visit, I took Uwe over to see Dan, and we spent an afternoon over there with Dan too. This guy right here, Steve Lewis. Steve Lewis is Great Britain's pole vault champ. And how I met him is my wife has a bucket list. At the age of 58, my wife's bucket list cost me a lot of fucking money. She wanted to learn how to pole vault. When you get to be 58, you don't want to learn how to pole vault. When you get to be 58 and I ask you what you want for your birthday, ladies, it's a fucking spa day. It's not, I want to go to Monica Grant's Teenage Mutant Ninja Warrior obstacle course in San Antonio, Texas for 2 fucking days. So my wife tells me, yeah, it's only $500. You and my son Fred are going to split it. Well, here's what Fred didn't have to incur. Fred didn't have to incur the back end of the cost, which was the plane flight, the hotel room, the food, the new outfits, the new tennis shoes, and the fact that when she came back, she had a first-degree AC separation of her left shoulder. I had to deal with that. But I met Steve because my wife wanted to pole vault, so I took her out to see Dan. I said, Dan, please nix this idea. Stop it. So Dan warms my wife up, and he says, oh, let's go over on the pole. So he puts up the rubber crossbar. My wife, she's not going over her feet first yet. She's just jumping over the pole. She clears 5 feet. I'm like, all right, that's good. She clears 6 feet. I'm like, all right, this isn't getting any better. She finally clears 7 feet without even bending the pole. Dan looks at me and goes, I'm like, the entire time I'm doing this. Stop. Do not. So Steve comes over, and I start talking to Steve. He goes, I'll train your wife. I'm like, great. How much? I'm not even going to tell you how much. It was $70 an hour. But anyway, now I got to pay Steve Lewis to train my wife. But here's the advantage of this. Steve has been in Dan Path's system for years. What do you think that meant to me? multiple hours of conversations talking about training and his understanding from an athlete standpoint, Dan Paff's system and how it worked for him and the adjustments and modifications he made based on him. So he's been a great source of knowledge, become a very close friend of mine, but another guy like Gadango, like James Smith, guys I can call and bounce ideas off and get the truth and get the honest answer. So those are all my acknowledgments. Again, this continues to grow, and this is the worst fucking clicker I've ever used in my life. Okay, is this it? Wait, oh yeah, here we go. All right, here's my favorite subject. And I'm not the only one saying this. These two guys are very smart people. Falling up on speed ladders, no force is produced at the hip. If speed ladders worked, piano players who have the greatest fastballs. Everybody know who Boo Schneckschneider is. Very intelligent man. Great guy to talk to. That's his decision. That's his comment. That's not mine. So I'm not the only one who has a hard-on, excuse me, ladies, for the foot ladder.